Good evening and welcome to tonight's lecture. It brings me great pleasure to present The Art of Magic by Kaine Walker. House rules. As your instructor this evening, I ask you please save all questions until the end of the presentation. Mark each question in the chat with a Q and ping the instructor to be brought on stage to speak. How's it going? My name is Kaine Walker, aka Venom, self-proclaimed writing concepts expert. I've been writing for over 7 years and hope to use my talents to be a solution to our current media problem. Unlike the other instructors you've heard from, I have no completed works, but my perspective and references will be enough to speak for me. Objectives. I wish to familiarize you all with the various types of magic systems, to stoke your sense for creating or adopting your own magic system, and to introduce you to the storytelling laws of magic, their limitations, and the parallels drawn between various magic systems. Let's begin. Sanderson's first law. An author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. If a character solves a problem using magic, it's important as a writer to properly explain how. Magic is not a crutch to be used when having written yourself into a corner. Exempli Gracia, a wizard did it. It is also important to not insult the intelligence of your reader by being too expository or having problems to be solved with no rhyme or reason. Sanderson's second law. Limitations are greater than power. Put in broader terms, the costs and limitations of your magic system are more interesting than its capabilities. Costs and limitations force your characters to be resourceful, create tension, or seek aid from other characters in the story. As a writer, they prevent your story from getting away from you. Sanderson's third law. Expand on what you have already before you add something new. All too often as writers, we focus so much on the creation of new concepts and ideas that we neglect to examine in depth those we've already made. Many would see this as retroactive continuity, or a retcon for short, but that is not always the case. Character could simply find a new way to apply an existing system, spell, or ability of any kind. Consider the extent of your magic system before risking the introduction of a contradiction. Instructor's notes. All right, guys, this is the slide I put in here just to kind of, deviate from the script a little bit, as well as to give you the references I actually used to make up this lecture. So I'm actually going to take a second to grab those for you. 1 second. I know for a fact the Superpower Wiki was one of my best resources for the later parts coming up, just because I needed a good reference for how many actual magic systems that I'd encountered over my media journey, from like various shows, books, movies, things like that, comics. And it was just a great shorthand for what I had already encountered. So let me go ahead and grab that for you. Superpower Wiki. And I'm going to explain how each of these actually helped me while I was making this lecture. There will be more about that later on in the lecture too, by the way. All right, so that's the first one. This next one here is going to be TV tropes, because TV tropes has everything. Like, it's just whatever you can think of, TV tropes likely has it in their references. So they were also very helpful. It's also a very good creative tool for when you're drafting or writing anything, or creating a character archetype, things of that nature. It's pretty much any storytelling element you can think of. You can also use TV tropes to cite. So that's another great one I used here. I referenced Brandon Sanderson in this lecture as well, so I'm actually going to link you to his website where he actually extrapolates on his laws in his own words. So give me a second here. There were actually two references I used for his laws, his actual website, and I actually don't know who these guys are, but they went into his rules in depth too, so I cited them as well. What was the last thing? Oh, there were two other references that I can't even remember. Oh, I think one of these actually just laid out the different types of magic within magic systems. That's the one I just sent you. That's another reference that I just had to search for, just to kind of pull from things I'd already seen. There were a couple things in there I didn't know about too, so it should help you out a great deal if you want to come up with more original magic systems, as well as a couple of bits of inspiration that you might not have thought of before. Yeah, and I believe this one here is the last one, categories of magic systems, and it details how magic systems may be implemented within each story. And we'll get into that later on in the lecture. I don't want to linger too long on this point, but feel free to review those references at the end of the lecture. I'm pretty sure they'll give you everything you need when it comes to trying to design your own magic system. But now that I've rambled on for a minute, we're going to go ahead and continue. Sanderson's Zeroth law. Always err on the side of awesome. The Zeroth law emphasizes creative spirit. In this case, it's applied to us as writers, though it can apply to any other craft, really. This rule signifies that the laws of magic can in some cases be guidelines rather than strict rules. Writing what you enjoy is just as important. As a writer, it is your job to balance the bending of these rules with the cohesion and logical consistency of your magic system. Intermission. All right, guys, if you need to, this is the time for you to take a break, get up, stretch, go to the bathroom, whatever. What I'm going to do is for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to bring everyone up here to mingle. And if any of you need to actually go to the restroom, you can. So I'm going to go ahead and invite you all up here. All right, I hope everyone enjoyed our intermission. Let's get back to the lecture. The spectrum of magic. Brandon describes this spectrum as hard magic, soft magic, and the middle ground. In this section of the lecture, I will be defining these terms and showing several examples of each for your reference. Soft magic. As the more fluid and less predictable end of the magical spectrum, soft magic does not adhere to any strict rules. By its very nature, it should rarely be used to solve problems in a story. It would better serve the plot to create them and only be used in a dire emergency to even attempt story resolution. Hard magic. The most rigid of the three types, hard magic is defined by its strict rules and is used to create a sense of immersion by treating the reader as a student or practitioner. This way, the audience knows what can be done with the magic, and what can't be done is used to create problems within the story. Medium magic. As the name suggests, medium magic blends aspects of hard and soft magic. It has spells, items, words, or places of power that have defined rules, but leaves room for more things to be discovered or even unknown entirely, which allows for a healthy mixture of both limitations and instability to go along with the strengths therein. Types of magic. Throughout your journey into media, you will have seen many different interpretations of the concept of magic, whether traditional or otherwise. Regardless of the name it carries, the trends are always the same no matter what type you decide to adopt or create. Superpowers. Inhuman abilities that are acquired by various, usually accidental means, and almost always have a unique scientific origin. This is the only distinction between this and what we know as traditional magical powers. Examples from fiction. Spider-Man from Marvel Comics. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from IDW Publishing. And Swamp Thing from Detective Comics. Quick note here. I was actually supposed to put, their secret identities for Spider-Man and Swamp Thing, but I forgot to, so I'm sorry about that. For the rest, I think I do, but moving on. Blessings from the gods. God-like abilities held by humans or demigods by blood, enchantment, rebirth, divine deal, reward, or deicide. In some cases, there is a cost associated. Examples from fiction. Kratos from the God of War series, Zagreus from the Hades series, and Black Adam, Theth Adam from Detective Comics. He. sometimes called chi or nin, is latent spiritual energy of many names found in every living thing. It can only be accessed by individuals of strong will and through intense training, usually granted in the form of martial discipline. It gives the user access to a range of superhuman abilities. Examples from fiction: Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star, Oni from Street Fighter, and Iron Fist from Marvel Comics. Technology. And this one might seem surprising because you'll see in a second. In fiction, there are many gifted enough to achieve scientific feats that border on impossibility. Citing one of the most famous of British science fiction writers, Arthur C. Clarke's 3 laws, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. As such, it should be treated as supernatural. There exist many examples of machinery powered by an ethereal substance, weapons forged from alien metals, or software capable of hacking anything known to man and beyond. Examples from fiction: Iron Man from Marvel Comics, Cyborg from Detective Comics, and Atom Smasher from Cyberpunk 2077 / Cyberpunk Edge Runners from CD Projekt Red. Elementalism. This is a branch of magic that features nature's elements and are not to be confused with the scientific kind. Those with this ability wield it as an extension of themselves and must still train their minds and bodies to make it effective. Examples from fiction: Iceman from Marvel Comics, Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and Terra from Detective Comics. Spellcraft. Being also known as witchcraft, it comes in many forms, but the most common one is conjuration. This particular type of magic is performed using words of power and may or may not require a magic focus, for the body can also serve as such, and rituals which require extra steps. Examples from fiction: Albus Dumbledore from the Harry Potter series, Zatanna Zatara from Detective Comics, and Dr. Stephen Strange from Marvel Comics. Quick note here, this is basically the concept of what we know as, fantasy style magic, traditional alchemy. Though not technically magic in the real world, in fiction, it is the mystical and scientific pursuit of the power of the Philosopher's Stone and universal panacea. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. It focuses on transmutation to create permanent changes to the states of matter. Though it is a form of magic, in fiction, it is still bound by the laws of conservation for matter and energy, as well as the law of equivalent exchange. Examples from fiction: the Elric brothers from Full Metal Alchemist, Professor Putricide from Warcraft, and Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher. Parallels. During the showcase of types, some of you may have noticed certain exceptions to the rules presented that are seen in many entertainment mediums. Those exceptions are the secret to creating your own type of magic. Being able to blend certain rules from one type to another could introduce more variables in your work that will give way to new discoveries, gateways to another realm of magic. I encourage you to experiment with aspects of every facet of these established types until you find something that you are satisfied with. And that's my presentation. Any questions? Panacea? That's how that's pronounced? Whatever. Whatever.
No?
Yeah, hang on. Let me read your question first before you start speaking. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hang on.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, you said your question is, it says it's indistinguishable from magic, but it's not magic. So is this a catch-22 on saying it's not magic, but making readers believe it is because of how advanced it is? So it's not a catch-22. It's that the further and further away you get from, things that can be scientifically proven within, the normal realms of what we understand from the real world, the more it just seems like a spell. It just seems like the person using the technology is a wizard from Hogwarts. because they have technology that can do things that pretty much break reality. Like in Star Trek, they can literally make food out of thin air because of the food maker thing. Like, that's impossible. That's basically magic.
Okay, so all right, so that's the reason why I'm asking that, because I wasn't actually thinking about Star Trek, but I thank you for bringing it up. Because like when you think about, it's like when I hear things like that, it's like my brain is like, okay, but there is a technological notion to it that makes it work. Unfortunately, it's just because, given our current understanding of how certain things work, scientific wise or technological wise, we ourselves are limited by it. But it's like,
I mean, no,
it's
it's
like I'm
still
saying.
technology. Like, no, it's still technology, but it's so far removed from reality and the way we understand technology, because there's certain substances in fiction that we just don't have in the real world, that it's basically magic. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the founding concepts of sci-fi. Except I don't think anyone ever imagined that the technology in these stories was straight so far from reality that it's basically just made up. It's just magic. It's just like getting something from nothing, like the food example from Star Trek, is impossible. You can't. Energy and matter cannot be created or destroyed. That's why it's basically magic.
Okay, so on that note though, and I'm not trying to say I'm not agreeing, but my problem with certain like concepts with like technology is just the fact that it's like I get where having advanced science can totally shift the fabric of human understanding. So it's like I'm not unaware of it, but I am unaware that there are times when it's like you can explain it as long as you don't do that whole quantum, science excuse. It's like you can kind of mostly explain certain things. Because like when you had mentioned like Cyborg, I was thinking to myself, I remember when he had explained what he was able to do with the, technology of his body system because of the, I think it was mother box that he had fused with.
Right.
And it was telling him that pretty much it was an advanced, like, it was not, I don't know if I'm paraphrasing here. It was like an advanced, like, AI system that was capable of, quote unquote, understanding the technology around it because it was literally crafted by, quote unquote, gods.
Yeah,
So
and that's the
because
part that makes it magic right there. Though some things, even most things, can be explained, there's still going to be aspects of it that are just vague and abstract. Like, for
Oh, okay. No,
example,
no, no. Now I get it. Now I get it.
for
Okay, go
example,
ahead.
the energy source that powers. We could actually use the energy source from Final Fantasy. What is it called? I
Which
forgot.
one?
Not materia.
Oh no, that would be a great example. That's in almost every one, I
Yeah,
think.
like you kind of know why the machinery works the way it does because of that energy source, but it's not fully explained where that energy source comes from, or why it works the way it does, or anything like that. Like for electricity, we can kind of explain that there's, electrons, protons, and neutrons, and like the atom and like stuff like that. Like we can figure out why electricity works the way it does to a certain extent, of course, but there's still mysteries within science. But most of it is explained to the point where you can actually grasp it. For the
Okay.
energy sources from fiction, it's pretty much just vague. Like it does what it does because it does. And we don't really have an explanation for
Oh,
why it just does.
what you call his name?
Like
Okay, so this
adamantium
does.
too. Like why is it so hard?
Okay, no,
Like
no, that would be another
in
question.
vibranium.
Okay. Can you come back to me because I have a question about Wanda Maximoff. I just can't remember which section she was from.
Wanda Maximoff wasn't mentioned. For the magic part, that was Raven as the example picture. But yeah, I'll bring you down. I'm gonna get to Soups because he asked something second. I do want to bring you back up though, because you raised some good points, like every time.
Okay. All right, I'll wait for it.
Got you. Feel free to ask your second question in the chat though. I'm gonna move you to the audience. All right, Soups, you're up. And you asked like 3 questions. We're gonna see if we can rapid fire all 3 of them. Hang on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. One sec. Your first question
First question
is.
was
Did you want to read it?
basically just the question. I don't know if you were gonna cover this later on, but it's just a question of how to handle keeping like everything balanced. But like, let's say you wanted to slowly power creep your characters, either the hero or the villain or both? How would how would you best do that without screwing over or messing up or just bending backwards to the system you already established before?
Bingo. So that was actually covered in the lecture. That was one of the rules that we covered that Sanderson came up with, and I'm gonna read it, but I'm also gonna elaborate because it's a little bit more complex than that in practice. So second, I think it was the third law. Yeah, Sanderson's third law. Expand on what you have already before you add something new. So, when a character gains more power, right, it's important to keep in mind where you plan on ending the capping the power off at. Dragon Ball had this problem where it just kept going with transformations, and there was never a sense of finality with how strong characters could actually get. And
Right.
what they have to understand is that without that sense of finality, nothing really has stakes because the main character is just going to change colors and he's going to become stronger than the main antagonist. So at a certain point, your characters have to get as strong as they're going to get, and then they're going to have to find more creative ways to defeat their opponents. If that makes sense. Did I fully answer your question a little bit, or was there something else you wanted to know?
No, that does answer that question, and else that does answer that question actually. Yeah, they just need basically someone to basically uh set the standard of who's the strongest.
Right. So
That is the strongest you can get.
yeah, each character has to have a sense of finality about their abilities. And for the antagonist, obviously, you know, you're not going to want every antagonist to just be this broken mess of an individual. There has to be something about your antagonist that makes them more potent, for lack of better words, than your main cast or main antagonist or protagonist, excuse me. It doesn't always have to be that they just have the most brute strength. They could be the most versatile. They could have this specific ability that makes them hard to defeat or something like that. You just have to be, I hate answering this way, but you just have to be creative about
work around that.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to stop me if I ramble on too long. I know I get verbose. Let me go to your second question.
I'm ready to ask about the second question.
Yeah. Let me go on to that one. Okay, the question. Balancing. Actually, for the sake of the recording, the first question was, so with all that in mind, how do we balance our characters while also increasing power without messing with the system? And yeah, I answered that already. I'm going to go to the second question, and that's going to be, does nanotechnology count as magic technology? Oh, and you were asking about, wait, Cyborg became human?
That was a bit more off topic because I was overhearing y'all talking about that.
He didn't really become human. He was able to basically become somewhat of a synthetic human. He could get his body back, sort of. He basically got his body back, but you know, you still have to keep in mind he's still a cyborg and yada yada. Like, he could make his skin feel human. He could get all his the parts he lost in his accident back because he fused with that mother box and was basically able to do anything. Like, that's why it's basically magic. Like, he went from being a cyborg back to being human, basically.
That sounds like they went too far now.
Oh yeah, and to answer your question, yes, nanotechnology counts as magic technology. It absolutely does, because of the cyborg example, actually, on top of the others. Like, you know, I think you're thinking about the suit from No Way Home. That's not the only example. It's not even my first example that comes from mind. Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking of like the Iron Man suit and Senator Armstrong from Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, and you know, just everyone
Yes,
who uses nanotechnology to like unbelievable extents.
You can make nanotechnology do anything. Like, even the name is vague. Nanotechnology, all right. Nanotechnology, are they bugs? Is it just really small computers? Like, what is it? Like, they don't really define nanotechnology. I think we just kind of assume that it's some sort of sentient liquid or a colony of microscopic bugs that just kind of, they're programmed to do pretty much whatever the story demands.
News about it like years ago. That's why I always thought, oh, there was just supposed to be like little Yeah, like little microscopic bugs.
That's
Technology.
really the way I've seen it portrayed the most, like just microscopic bugs, nanites. But in the movies, it
You
just
can make
seems like,
weapons out of those buggers.
yeah, they can morph into whatever. It seems like liquid more days. Like with the Endo-Sim suit with Iron Man, it seemed like a liquid, like just like a sentient liquid. Did I answer that question for you?
Yes.
Did you have a third question, or was it just two?
It was really just two. That cyborg one was more of just a off-topic response question. It wasn't meant for the lecture.
Okay. I'm gonna drop you back down because I think Black had another question, unless someone was ahead of him. Let me see. Oh, the food thing in Star Trek is called a replicator. Thanks. I forgot what it was called. Like, I'll bring you up to elaborate on the Star Trek point after I get Black because he has a question. All right, Soups. Just go ahead and put your question in the chat. I'm gonna bring Black back up. I accepted your request. Just let me read your question real quick. Question. Wanda Maximoff uses a thing called chaos magic, which is defined as magic that is her main power as the superhuman ability to manipulate the powerful magic known as chaos magic, which allows her to alter reality and control various forms of mystical energy. Whatever the fuck that means. Yeah, see, that's part of the problem with magic, because her power set before the House of M basically boils down to energy projection until you introduce the elements of reality warping. Number one, where does this magic fall? Because it seems divine. Two, is it still magic because it is something that shifts the spectrum of all reality to a massive T? All right, so there's a couple ways I can answer this, but I'm gonna let you talk first to elaborate.
All right, so I guess my point though is just that it's like one thing I hated in a weird way about Wanda's powers, especially because show kind of made it very obvious in a weird sense, is that she has this ability where she's able to do so much so easily, and even in the comics sometimes you see it, and I keep thinking to myself, it's like there seems to be almost no consequence on her person. Like if she, it's like the only consequence that might come about is if she has like a huge major explosive meltdown.
Okay.
And it's like she'll wipe out her own memory while at the same time wiping out like all of a normal existence and replacing it with something else, aka the M-Day event or something. But it's like it just seems like when you have somebody who's able to just apparently warp like the very cosmos around her of the universe.
Yeah, they're pretty powerful.
Like my brain is like, okay, but that seems like something that respectfully only a god could do. And that kind of is what leads into my second question, because it's like, if you have the quote powers of a god, is it still called magic, or is it called quote divine providence?
No, it's still magic. So okay, let me think for a second.
Yeah, I caught you slipping this time. I'm joking.
Well, no. Yeah, you stumped me. I gotta analyze this for a couple seconds, because like it's still
it's a pain in the butt. I'm just gonna say it is a pain in the butt.
I mean, it's still magic. It's just that it's coming from a being that's not human, right? And that's why you're able to blur the lines a little bit when it comes to magic systems, and that's why I had a couple categories in there where it's basically humans or demi-humans having the powers, or at least a fraction of the power of gods, right? It's still magic, but you do raise a valid point about her not really having a cost to her magic. Most of the time, when it's just regular things like energy projection and force field projection, it makes sense. But when she's warping reality, it should have a cost, like losing your memory or dying in the process, or breaking reality to the point where it's wiped out of existence completely. They did that with Jean Grey, I believe. Anyone who's capable of warping reality is pretty much just like this god level threat. So yeah.
Okay, so yeah. And that's kind of all right, and that kind of falls into that. I don't want to say the same spectrum, but it's like she gets in touch with this thing that is a Phoenix Force, and it's like she's able to do all this insane like shifting the very fabric of reality thing. I don't know if it's on the same level as Wanda Maximoff, but it does have those
Reality
same
warping is real.
elements.
Okay, sorry. There's different levels to reality warping. Shit. I can't. Okay, I'm trying to pull this
But
from the top of my head.
it's
Good.
like, but all right. I guess the reason why I just brought this up because I do have to run, unfortunately, in a bit. I just brought this up because it just seems like when you have a power that literally allows you to like shoot thunderbolts from your fingertips, and it's not your element or your spectrum, but you have a source of energy that allows you to do it, or you're able to quote, like I said, just move from one point of reality to another point, like, or like we just said with the whole warping realities thing. It's like people say, oh, she gains this power and it's from a mystical source of energy. Then this mystical source of energy feels like divine providence.
I
Or
mean,
the
that's
opposite.
basically, that's usually the explanation for magic anyway. Magic either comes from gods or aliens. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the nature of it.
Okay, I can get that. I can get that.
That's the part of magic that makes it so exciting. The limits are pretty much only your imagination, and to think too hard on where it comes from or why is likely to drive you insane. That's why things like Lovecraft's magic system or the deep ones and things like that come to be, is because sometimes we're not meant to know everything, and that's why he kind of played with that idea. When
Finally, something learned.
people are too nosy about the secrets of the universe, when they have no business poking their nose into it, they end up going insane because it's only meant to be known by beings who are of a higher level of existence that aren't human. So yeah, that's why magic is so is so cool, man. Like I never understood why people dismissed it back in the day in the 90s and stuff like that. But anyway, I don't want to ramble too much longer. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. You did.
Awesome. I'm gonna bring you down, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring Flight up to elaborate on the Star Trek point for a bit, and then after that, I'm going to bring up Soups for a question.
Hello.
What's up? What do you want to say about the Star Trek point and the
Wait.
nanomachines point?
So to explain what I was getting to is a perfect example of what you were talking about earlier, where you wanted to see a world that its magic system is entirely technological.
That'd be dope. Yeah.
That world is Star Trek. It's a
So all
world.
the technology is like impossible, basically.
It's a world where they've reached the extent where the whole point is they've reached a level of technology where they're doing things that are equivalent to magic systems, teleportation, creating holographic versions of things that can actually hurt you, creating things out of thin air.
What? Holograms that can hurt you?
Yes, one of the movies makes a specific point that
They
they have
put
a
that
thing
in
called
like a. How do you put that in something?
Hold on,
How do you do?
no, this is a perfect example of what I'm getting to. Is in that movie, what they're doing is they have a thing called a holodeck, which works to the same principle as most of the other technology, which is, well, a form of nanotechnology. That being, they're taking the fundamental building blocks of the universe, atoms and molecules, and they're able to directly control them. In the movie, they're able to use this to make holograms or replications, and it's a plot point. They bring it up that that form of technology has specific limiters, so you don't hurt anybody. But you take those limiters off, and you see a guy take a holographic Tommy gun and just
Oh
start
my god.
shooting guys he's fighting against. But it's a perfect world to explain what I was talking about with nanotechnology. That being that nanotechnology is the perfect example of a form of techno magic that has reached the peak.
Technomancy
That
is
being
dope
that,
too.
Mhm. That being that when you're able to freely alter the building blocks of the universe,
Which is impossible. Bruh.
Not,
No, I mean in the
not
real
to-
world it's impossible. I mean in the real world.
not necessarily, actually.
Bro. This is another one of Clark's laws. When an old man says something is impossible, it's most certainly not. It's most certainly not impossible.
Because that's the thing with even now we're working on experiments. I know that pop culture has ruined this term, quantum.
It doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah, but in terms of science, quantum mechanics is
Yeah, it's an actual
I
concept.
believe it's. I'm sorry, what was that?
No, I'm saying, yeah, it's an actual concept within science.
Yes, this actual concept is an actual field of study, and that is trying to alter things at a level that's smaller than atoms. I believe that's the general gist of it. But all of that is to say, that's the level where science breaches over into levels that are pretty much magic, where you're altering the very nature of matter and changing one thing into another freely.
Without
Another
a
good
cost.
Typically there is a cost, but in reality there really isn't, because once you reach that level, it's not a thing. Getting back to the costing, where that's an interesting part or point of it, where when you reach the level where you could turn dirt into fuel, you've reached a point where you're right, there is no cost, because as long as you have any form of matter, you could turn that into anything you need. That's where most of those systems gets ridiculous.
Well, technically, I mean, while it is kind of ridiculous that you can take like just sand or dirt with no nutrients or energy and basically convert it into an energy source, that's still technically a cost. It's just that the cost is so small that it basically doesn't matter. When I'm talking about, my bad. When I'm talking about magic or technology being indistinguishable from magic, I mean literally you have technology that creates something out of literally nothing, like thin air.
And as I was speaking, no, I get that. And as I was speaking about it, I was reminded of another universe that has reached a point where they're doing exactly what you're talking about, creating something out of nothing. And this is where my big nerd's gonna come out, and this is the deep lore of the Halo franchise.
Oh god.
Yeah.
You can go on for a little bit longer. I think this is actually very enriching material. I think this is good. Go ahead.
So, TLDR for Halo, aliens, humans fight each other because aliens worship the standard ancient advanced race that somehow died out.
The Prometheans?
Forerunners.
Wait, were the Prometheans introduced after? The Forerunners were,
The Prometheans were introduced in 4, and what the Prometheans are, they are just basically robots created by the Forerunners.
Okay.
But getting back to that, you have a second, even ancienter species that is even more ridiculous. Those being the precursors. And they are at the level where they're creating where they create mass from nothing. And the stuff they're able to do is just, what the hell?
Right, it's impossible. It should be impossible, at least.
Yeah. I mean, this is why I enjoy the deep lore books, but I'm also like, yeah, most people are never going to get to this point where they talk about something in the Halo universe which is called a star robe, which is a piece of precursor technology that defies the laws of physics. where it's basically, think of it as invisible highway in space that can create or eliminate its mass at will.
That sounds ridiculous, man. We can talk about this for the rest of the night, man. It's messed up because I want you to keep going, but we gotta. I got questions I gotta get to, so I might end up bringing you back up after all the questions have been taken, just to elaborate on that further. I am gonna read the comment that you posted up there though, about nanotech. It says nanotechnology, usually via nanomachines or quantum manipulation, the ability to directly control and move molecules and atoms. Due to this ability to alter the fundamental building blocks of matter, you can create anything by breaking other things down and using the molecules to build something else. Which gets crazy whenever you can use dirt to make a sword. Like, swords are usually made like out of iron. But you know, whatever. Nanotechnology, I got nanomachines, son. All right, Soups, you're up. Let me go ahead and read your question for the audience. Just a second. Question: how would one handle putting more than one power system in the same universe without causing confusion among magic systems or alienating audiences? I'm glad you asked this. Okay. One of the most, I actually thought about this while I was making the lecture, because this is also something that's another one of those things that I've seen, and we've all seen it before, right? Marvel and DC Comics.
Yeah.
They have multiple different types of magic systems within their worlds, and that's what makes them both middle magic systems, because they have, they have the traditional superpower system, as well as the blessings from the god system, as well as the, what else? Pretty much have everything, to be honest. They have the technology.
The spellcaster.
Yeah.
Technology.
They basically have everything rolled into one. And the way that you introduce those systems by themselves, which is going to be hard to do in a novel because you don't have visual aids to help you, is that you're basically going to have separate civilizations or separate worlds. I think separate civilizations is achievable if you want to keep within the same realm, the same place or same setting. You're going to have two different societies that have two separate systems, right? I actually was going to introduce something like this in my story, but it's to a much lesser degree. So essentially, the story that's supposed to be America was going to have there wasn't going to be any magic or anything like that, like magical abilities, like magical spells, in this America type place, which I have yet to name. There was basically going to be metals that actually cancel out mystical abilities, and like there's going to be metals that have different properties and abilities that can be used, somewhat like magic. Like, it was basically going to be magic items, but it's going to be like, ore that you find within the earth.
So magic items that can block out magic.
Well, that was just one example. But yeah, iron ore would be able to nullify magical abilities. Let's say gold would be able to do something, etc. I'm still thinking on that. But yeah, one of the best ways to do it, if you want to stay within the same setting, you're going to have two separate societies that have different magic systems. Like, maybe, for example, there's this dwarven society that uses technology and that's all they use, and there's another society that does use traditional magic, and then there's this other society that relies on their physiology to do amazing things, and they don't really rely on spells or technology to the same extent as the other. So it's something that you can do. You would just have to establish each system separately and make sure the audience understands what's going on. And if you wanted to blend them, which I think would be easy as long as the audience was following what each individual system could do, you could just, like these people that rely on their physiologies to do amazing things could learn how to use traditional magic. They could learn how to adopt the technology of the other dwarven race that uses technology exclusively, etc. So yeah, like there's ways of blending it all together, and you've seen it before. It just seems a bit daunting when it comes to like something without visual aid. Go ahead.
And I was gonna say, and what's the best way to do that without like turning people away, especially if you're doing this in the same novel series where like everyone was used to traditional superpowers
Mm-hmm.
without higher magic and all that physiology and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like how best to handle introducing stuff like that without everyone going, oh no, screw that.
Can you help me out a little bit? Can you type that in the chat so I can wrap my head around it better? Because being able to see your question.
Just how to introduce or like cross over different magic systems without making it feel what's the word for it? What's another word for alienating? I mean, without just turning the audience away because they'll stop believing it, you know?
Oh,
Stop
okay.
believing you have a set system, you know?
I mean, the idea would be that you don't really have a set system, or at least to the extent that there's going to be one and that's all they're ever going to see. The way you do that without turning the audience off is to follow the rules of each system you put in place. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's pretty much that's the best way to do it. I think that's the only way you could do it successfully because bringing up Marvel and DC Comics again, they've managed to do it successfully because, you know, Billy Batson, he received blessings from the gods, but they still counted his superpowers because he still kind of carries the image of someone like Superman because he looks so similar to him, and he also exists in a superhero universe. But technically, they're not superpowers in the sense that it was established historically because there was no scientific origin. It wasn't really an accident and, you know, things like that. So there is a way to weave those things together. Superman and Billy Batson exist in the same universe. Superman is actually the example that I gave about, you know, his physiology is the reason why he gets his powers. So, you know, you can see how you can see the parallels being drawn there where it kind of bends the rules of the superhero genre because he wasn't bitten by some radioactive thing. He didn't fall into some vat of radiation. His physiology just reacts to the different types of radiation emitted by the sun's, the stars in space. So, yeah. Yeah, so that's a way you can introduce multiple systems as well. I mean, they still count him as a superhero because of the nature of comics again, but yeah. You just kind of have to make sure your audience understands what's going on. I don't think it'll turn anyone away if you thoroughly explain why they're able to do what they do. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, and if you want more in-depth, you know, descriptions on that, you can talk to me offline if you ever reach a point like that in your story where you want to play around with that idea. So I'm gonna go ahead and move you back down. I think somebody else had something to say. Let's see. You guys have any other questions? Marvel's basically the Fortnite of power systems. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say they're the fork knife of power systems. You made me say that game's name correctly. I hate you. I don't think they're the fork knife of power systems. I just think they, you know, as you let stories exchange hands between multiple writers, they just come up with their own ideas because oftentimes back in the day, writers were given complete creative control over what was established. But I think they do it pretty well because each character in the stories is an individual. And that's kind of the secret to making it all believable. You follow their individual origin story and you see them gaining their powers unfold in front of you. And you're just kind of like, ah, that makes sense. And you can see why Billy Batson is different from Superman, you know, and no one's turned away because it doesn't feel unbelievable. Superman is an alien who came to Earth, and his physiology being altered basically by the yellow sun's rays gave him his super abilities. Billy Batson was granted the powers of Shazam by that wizard guy whose name escapes me. So yeah, I mean, both of those things make sense. And each of their power sets have their own individual rules. Superman has a weakness to kryptonite. If Billy Batson says Shazam at the wrong time and the lightning bolt hits him when he doesn't want it to, he can be changed back into his child state or into his superhero state in an event where he doesn't want the opposite effect to happen, if that makes sense. So yeah, as long as you adhere to the rules of each character's power sets, I don't think anyone's going to be turned away, or, you know, it's not going to affect the suspension of disbelief.